Hello and welcome to my Crown Victoria 2 years of ownership video. The last video I did on this car, I'd owned it for about 2 months and I just got it registered and roadworthy and done a few minor upgrades at that point. It had 123,000 miles then, and now it has just over 146,000. Since then, a lot has changed, so let's take a look around the car, see what's changed, and I'll give you my experiences and opinion of living with a Crown Victoria Police Interceptor after 2 years. Right off the bat, you can see in the front I painted the front bumper where the license plate cover once was. I had several plates there at one point, but now I just rock a clean look. I got some white paint for it, so it's definitely off. The car's more of an eggshell color, and I definitely did a pretty poor job at it, but I think it's not really too bad, and you really can't tell in most lighting. Plus, it's not too irregular, being where the plate usually would go, and it beats the crustiness that was there before. I also painted down here. In between, I rocked a few different plates, including first a canine plate. Now, with that plate, I originally thought of it as a novelty. I thought it'd be a laugh at car meets and be a fun novelty, kind of like how people dress up cars as taxis and whatnot sometimes and bring them to car shows and stuff. But I learned pretty quick from coworkers and friends it wasn't that simple. Some people don't take too kindly to a joke like that, and many would associate that with a group called whackers, which give many Crown Vic owners and retired emergency vehicle owners in general a very bad rap. They're basically people that dress their cars up like police cars on purpose to go on power trips, or worse. So to not be associated with that, I stopped it. Definitely was not a very smart one, not a very smart move looking back, but I replaced that with this custom one that I ordered off Amazon that said not in service. I've got a lot of comments from it and people liked it, and people stopped driving really slow around me after it, so I guess mission accomplished. But since then I have removed it and just painted behind it and not really bothered to put one back on since then. Now moving on to the wheels, I did repaint these last in the summer of 2021, like I said I wanted to in that first video. So I eventually did get around to that. So far 3 coats of Rust-Oleum has held up great. Black gloss Rust-Oleum, and it still shines. It chips here and there sometimes if I'm using a screwdriver to pry the hubcaps off, or just rocks from the road sometimes. But honestly, at some point I'll just redo them in the future, maybe a few years down the line. I don't really care that much, and it does the job. It does the job just fine. In some pictures, they really look magnificent. And just the paint job alone makes this car look way cleaner than 95% of P71s on the road today. One of the hubcaps is loose, this one right here. I don't know what to do about that. It makes little rattling noises. It's always been like that. I've tried bending stuff on the back of it, but to no avail. The headlights are still as clear as they were 2 years ago, but now I've installed LED bulbs instead, which have a greater shine, though I have aimed them very far downward currently, and I need to readjust them at the moment. But they do their job and produce no heat while doing it. And then the rest of the bulbs are still OEM apart from the license plate bulb, which creates a really cool bright light at night and highlights my vanity plate, which I will add I thought of because Not a Cop and Not Fuzz were taken here in Georgia. And I got it at the end of 2021. So that is another thing that has changed since the very first video. Other exterior updates, the piece of flex tape up top is still there and it's still going strong, though I've replaced it twice now. The bumper tuck is still holding up back there, and I've done a few Halloween decorations back there and up front as well as Christmas ones. So fun has been had. And I plan for the 4th of July to run a flag. I've added a few more stickers around the car, just a few to add a little flair. And this one in particular is one more reason people don't mistake me for an actual cop, if they didn't catch the not in service plate. I also have my Insta tag here. Post ever so often, updates on this car as well as photo shoots. Nothing special really. The last things I want to call attention to are the spotlight hole plastic piece, which I painted, even though it doesn't really make much difference. I do want to highlight also the fact that the paint is chipping in several places. I don't know what paint this is using or who did it. But I would believe it if it is factory paint, because it sure chips like factory Ford white paint. Usually it's chipped when I've hit it with tools while working on it, or just from bumping into it with something hard like a backpack or something. It's unfortunate, but I'm not going to sit here and redo paint on a Crown Vic, at least not yet, until I get some major problems, major chipping. That said, it still looks quite stunning from afar. It's slightly matte finish, and it reflects city lights magnificently. If you don't look too close, it's not bad at all. So that's pretty much it for the exterior. I still want to get a push bar for it, but I'm just holding out on it because I don't know if it's worth it to cut holes in the bumper, sacrificing the clean look. I also still want to rework the exhaust system to get chrome tips shooting straight out the back, but that requires time, effort, and money, because I'm definitely not doing that myself. But eventually, I do want to work up to that. So now let's move on to the engine bay. So up in here, several things have changed. First and foremost, I did the spark plug since the last video. It's pretty straightforward. You just need a swivel socket because it is a tight fit. Just remember to blow the area around them with compressed air before you remove the coils, because a lot of crushed leaves fell in there and I had to blow it all out. But the worst part though is, unfortunately, I had an extra problem right in this spark plug hole here. I took the coil out and found coolant in it, as you can see here. So that day I called off work. Suffice to say, I got it all out after several hours of a combo of compressed air, cotton swabbing, and a very, very small hose taped to a vacuum. After it was all out, I was able to replace the plug and the coil, and all was good. The source of my problems was the intake manifold. I forget what the issue was in the car specifically. Gaskets or the fact it was plastic, I don't know. But basically the coolant crossover point was faulty, and it leaked coolant everywhere on top of the engine. So I got that replaced. I didn't do it myself because I remember watching the video, and by the 30-minute mark, I was already thinking it was beyond my means. Because when I see 30 minutes in video times, it's probably 8 hours in DIY. Like if it's like a 2-minute video, then it's probably like, or maybe 5 minutes, it's probably like 1 or 2 hours translated. And then the guy gets out a blowtorch. And I said, okay, that's it. I'm taking it in. So I don't know if I was overreacting, but yeah, I got that done at a place. And they also replaced the alternator brackets and other stuff that came with it. So, you know, it looks really shiny, I guess. Not even to lie, I don't know the extent. But hey, the car works. And if you have one of these, just know it'll be a problem area. I've heard some people replace it with the metal performance ones, but I don't think that's even related to my problem, because I know in older Panther cars, the plastic just straight up cracks. Don't know if that's what happened with my car. I'm not sure. Either way, I didn't see anything. I just knew there were coolant on top of the engine. Another thing is the wiper fluid motor. I got that to work again. Turns out it didn't work before because the motor filter wasn't flush and was leaking. So I got a whole new motor for like 12 bucks with a new filter, and bam, hose fluid and the spray still works. I've also replaced the cylinder head temp sensor. Just keep in mind this will fail in these cars from what I've seen. And Ford combines several sensors into one on this, including the coolant temp sensor, and its location is a real pain. Right behind the alternator and in this crevice, when in the older models was right on top of the engine. And it's in kind of a peculiar place where you can't really use a socket on it, so you're going to have to use some pliers or vice grips or something like that to get it tightened down. And to get it out, you'll have to destroy the plastic piece. But on the older models, it was right on top of the engine. So I think it's, if you have a pre-2008 or maybe it's pre-2006 model, your coolant temp sensor will be right on top of the engine, so you won't have to go and take out the cylinder head temp. Anyways, yeah, the car was reading the engine temp as falsely cold. Like it was only halfway heated up after driving it for like 20 minutes. And these V8s heat up fast, so it was definitely off. Beyond that, the engine is pretty much the same as it was 2 years ago. Still trucking, but it does have a bit of an adjuster tick that wasn't there, or at least it wasn't as loud back then. But I'm not worried about it. In the summer months, I'm going to try some 5W30 and see if it helps. On to some other crucial maintenance on this car. I have done the struts, sway bar end links, and upper and lower control arms up front and in back. Basically the whole suspension on all four corners. And the rear suspension was extremely easy. Just take note, it is very easy to do the rear, no hassle, but the front is very meaty, and it took quite a bit to get that right. Altogether though, it took 2 days to do the front and 1 to do the rear, so it wasn't horrible. As far as I've seen, that's pretty standard when it comes to cars, unless you have like a German car. But if I actually had adequate tools, like a lift, it could be done extremely quickly. One thing to note when doing these control arms is that you really want to tighten this bolt here. When taking it off, you don't have to worry about it, so I didn't really think much of it putting it back on. But thank God it wasn't one of those things where I just started wrenching on something, because the video I watched noted tightening that bolt. Another thing to note is that if you're going to do your own front control arms, the driver's side bolt where the control arm is held up is right where the boot for the tie rod end is. And you really gotta pull on it and squeeze it past to get it out. It's also close on the passenger side, but the steering rack does not have the steering column holding you back on that side, so it's not as hard to get it out. But yeah, you really gotta pull on it and squeeze it right past to get it out. It took 2 people and taking the entire steering rack off and the steering column from the steering rack to get that bolt out of there. And I've seen people do even more to get it out of there. But yeah, we loosened the steering rack, took off the steering column to give as much clearance as possible. But unfortunately, the video did not give a warning. So I will give it to you now, because sometimes we're stupid and not thinking of common sense. So with the new control arms installed, the steering column was ready to go back on the rack. In order to do so, we had to align the steering wheel back up with the notch on the rack. Well, modern steering wheels have a lot of things wired into them, such as the horn, buttons, and airbag. Unfortunately, we overturned it, not thinking of the consequences, and as a result, an airbag light came on a few days afterwards, caused by what I assumed as a short. I took it to a shop to figure out the codes and what was wrong, and it was the clock spring, apparently. I didn't think it was at the time because the horn still worked, but I guess it was a good place to start. After all, I don't know anything about it anyways. Unfortunately, right after I picked the car up and paid for it, the light came back on. I'm not kidding. Right after I got it, blinking 11 times first, then a pause, then 8 times, then a solid light, as you can see here. It'll do that for several days until it just goes off, and it'll stay off for days until turning on again and doing the same spiel. This is something I can't find anything about online. Maybe it's a short, I don't know. So I took it back in and they cleaned the connectors, whatever that'll do. And I got the car back and it didn't come on afterwards, but not 2 days later, it came right back on, as I pretty much knew it would happen anyways. Took it back in and they basically told me they couldn't fix it, in a way, by stating they had a theory that it was the dash cam plugged into the OBD2 port causing interference. But I drove around with it unplugged and it still came on. And it's them basically telling me they couldn't fix it at that point. And they were doing nothing I really couldn't attempt at home. So today I sit not certain if my airbag even works. A lot of money out of pocket. And the light is still on. Moral of the story, don't turn your steering wheel too much. Now on that topic, I also had a drain and fill done at that same shop. And word of the wise to Crown Vic owners, Crown Victorias after 2009 are supposed to use Mercon LV. And the ones before are supposed to use Mercon V, as it says on this Motorcraft chart, even though they run the same transmission. Now, I don't see this being a huge issue, seeing as very few people have brought it up online, and I know many people put Mercon V in newer Vics anyways. But just be aware, for whatever reason, the owner's manual, as it says on this 09 Vic, as well as the dipstick, says that it's Mercon LV. I know it's a lower viscosity fluid, maybe thicker or thinner, I don't know. I think it's thicker if I'm not mistaken. Maybe the transmission is rated to run it, I'm not sure. Or maybe there's no actual difference. But I did have an experience at the same shop when I asked for a drain and fill because my transmission was slipping, as it always has, but it's been getting a little bit worse, noticeably. And as I said in the first video, the transmission is the Achilles heel of these cars, so I wanted to make sure it was right. First I tried to fill it up, and I think I filled it up too far because I read the dipstick like an engine oil dipstick. So I'll link a great video in the description on how to read it properly to prevent problems from happening to others. And when I siphoned some of the fluid out, I realized it was pretty burnt, which I will note is sort of how LV is supposed to look like, pretty dark. But I wanted to get the right amount anyway, so I had the shop do it while I was there for the airbag light. So when I got the receipt back and I got home, I realized it read Mercon V, as you can see here. So I was like, wait, that's not what I remember reading my transmission to. The very first drain and fill I ever got was in the summer of 2021, and it was a Pennzoil LV compatible fluid. Granted, it's not Mercon, but it's still stuff that's supposed to work with the LV. So I researched what happens when you go backwards compatible and when you mix stuff, and nothing specific came up, just basically go like it could cause damage. But genuinely, I didn't care what happens, I just wanted to get the right fluid and go by the book, considering it's a well-used and abused and fairly old car. So I asked them what could they do, and I was denied because their system said it was Mercon V, which the car took. which they showed me and everything. 2009 Crown Victoria. So I went to a Ford dealer because I wanted to see if there was anyone there that knew anything about transmission fluid that could get me a definitive answer. Was I overreacting, or am I getting screwed over here? Fortunately, no one there could answer my question. There was just a kid there. But he was very helpful. He put in my VIN, was able to print out a paper saying, my car takes LV, as Ford says, and it's not interchangeable with any other fluids. So I went back and decided to fight, and the guy who was working there wasn't happy, but they rang it up as a customer satisfaction repair and did it over again with LV. At least now, the car would not have a mix of transmission fluids, and beyond that, would not possibly, possibly have the wrong transmission fluid in it. So now, theoretically, all would be right. As I was reading my receipt after, it read, as you can see here, customer is convinced that the Mercon V was not the correct fluid type. They said based on application guides available, and in our opinion is the correct fluid type for this application. However, in order to satisfy this customer's concerns, the transmission fluid was exchanged. But the way I see it, it's not a matter of being convinced. It's on the owner's manual and on Motorcraft's website and on the VIN at Ford. My argument was that if their system they were using has it wrong, why should I be at a loss? But the worst part is at the very end, they state because the fluid is not compatible with the Mercon V they put in the transmission, and a drain and fill, of course, won't take all of it out of the whole system, the system had to be flushed. Which, if you know even an inkling about automatic transmissions, is basically suicide, especially with an old one. The transmission runs well now, of course. It shifts smoother, and it doesn't slip as much. But it still does, though. But honestly, I've just had enough. I just want my car back. I'm tired of it for now, and I've fought enough, and they worked with me enough with my concerns, even though my car left probably in a worse state than I went in. Mind you, this is a very reputable shop. I'm not going to say names, but my family has went there in the past, and I've always recommended it to friends. And it has a 4.8 rating on Google. It's not your everyday Pet Boys or Meineke or whatever. And every time up until now, they've done good work, even if they're a little pricey. But suffice to say, I don't think I'll be going back now. Still, I left a good review for good vibes, 5 stars for their troubles. I think the Crown Vic is a special little problem child. 98% of the time, they do really good work, and I'd rather they become more incentivized to attend to customers' needs like that, rather than being chastised for it. Either way, I'm taking it to a dealer next to hopefully get the airbag light properly fixed, and I hope this store can help you avoid my pitfalls in Crown Vic ownership. As for other upgrades I've done since 2021, we're getting back on track now. I've replaced 2 batteries. The first one got extremely corroded on me within a year, and so far this basic new one has been just fine. I don't know what was going on with the first one. And I'm also still riding the same tires, Hankooks. Definitely not getting these again though, because they slide around like crazy. I remember on a hill pulling it onto a road, a cop pulled me over for drag at 4 a.m. because I spun the tires. Luckily, they let me go. On the topic of tickets, I've gotten 2 since the first video, one for going 87 and a 70, and the other for this. I wanted to fight it, but it probably would have been more hassle than the $120 that I had to pay for it. So I folded. Back on the topic of tires, I've now spun out 3 times, and Lincoln's head is still not even close to being visible just yet. In the wet, if you put a little bit of power down while turning in this thing, you could very well go around. I remember one time I was pulling out of the school parking deck, and it happened, and my crush was in the other lane behind me. And I mashed the gas with a peace sign out the window because I thought it'd be cool. And it happened right there. But I caught myself and slid for a little bit, so it looked like I meant to do it. I was happy in the moment because maybe I just got lucky then, but usually I'm not too happy when it happens. Long story short, went out to dinner once and basically never talked to him. That ounce of showboating may or may not have contributed to that, but I have no idea. So yeah, Crown Vic ownership. Back to other improvements on this car. I've replaced the thermostat on the engine. The normal one separate from the cylinder head temperature sensor, of course, right at the top of the engine here. And I've actually replaced it twice. Once when it failed first, and again when the cylinder head temp sensor failed. Just in case the normal thermostat was the source of my problems, though it ended up not being that. Just in case, though. I've also done all 4 corners, the brakes, twice over now. I have Duralast in the back and whatever they sell at Advanced Auto in the front. So far they work just fine, though note to self, the Advanced Auto ones have what looks to be less surface area. So just keep that in mind. The way I see it is just common sense. Less surface area means less braking force, at least earlier on in the weathering of the pads, as you can see here. I replaced the neutral safety switch because the car sometimes wouldn't turn on when, unless it's put in neutral. Unfortunately, it didn't fix it, and it still does it once in a blue moon. Still no idea what that problem could be. Just one more problem with no obvious answers on this car. I'm seeing a bit of a pattern here, honestly. I've also had the oil cooler lines replaced. Key thing to note that I don't think I touched on in the first video, Crown Vic P71s have oil coolers, just like race cars and semi-trucks. It's a cool bit of trivia. I realized this after some of my friends were installing oil coolers on their cars. I was like, wait, your cars don't just come with oil coolers? So yeah, it's really cool coming up, learning about cars, not really knowing anything, but while having a Crown Vic. It'll never cease to surprise you and keep making you proud to own it. The horn was fixed as it was rewired since it didn't work in the first video, as the police department snipped the siren box and the horn was connected to that. I've done many oil changes because I usually do them at about 4,000 miles, occasionally going longer, and then I replaced the fuel filter, which was very easy. You just need some fuel line tools. I also did the alternator and the idler pulley. The pulley is something you have to watch out for. Once there is a whining noise coming from the engine, replace that sucker. It's very easy, just take the circ belt off and undo a bolt. And the very last item that's been interchanged since the first video was my entire rear end. The gearing, axle, everything. See, right before that first video, I got a new one because the very first one I bought with the car was completely junked. Something that me and my boy didn't know to look for when we picked the car up originally. This is what it looked like then. So just look out for that. It's pretty easy to spot, not gonna lie, honestly. So it was replaced. I drove it to Wisconsin after that, about a 1,600 mile drive there and back in the summer, and made the drive just fine. And then after that, it started to develop a grinding between 45 and 60 miles per hour, replaced by a metal clinking noise at highway speeds. It started humming and making very, very loud noises when driven for long amounts of time and heating up. And at that point, I knew something was horribly wrong. A shop was able to tell me that the axle seals had leaked internally somehow, without any of it coming out onto the ground, unlike the first time, and the diff was now bone dry. The shop I took it to was a different one than the one I took it to later, and just for context, this was fall of 2021 and the transmission and airbag problems were fall of 2022. As most shops do it, they don't have a warranty on rear axle work, especially with parts from a third party, which this one was, but I was able to get a labor warranty, so I got a whole new rear end put in for just about $1,000. Still, it was a messy situation, and for those with these cars, hopefully you can recognize these signs earlier, because I thought it was torque converter shutter, but it wasn't. Looking back though, I think I just have horrible luck with cars. First my Ford Taurus water pump explodes on the highway, then the rear end, then the intake manifold, then the airbag light and transmission. I don't know what the moral of the story is. Maybe it's don't take your car to a shop, maybe it's don't work on it yourself, or maybe it's do work on it yourself, but do adequate research, or just know what you're doing. All I can tell you is consider all of these points the best you can, because with an old police car like this, it's not if you run into problems like these, it's when. So just be ready, this isn't your grandpa's Crown Vic, it's a real money pit. A money pit I've sunk over $10,000 into over 2 years in my own work and from taking it into shops combined. That's $10,000 I could have been spending on Panda Express orange chicken with teriyaki and chow mein and a medium Dr. Pepper no ice, man. Come on. But all that said, I don't think that you can rival the satisfaction and the fun that this car has provided. It's taken me a lot mentally, financially, and physically to get this car to where I want it, and it still has a lot to go. But it's been with me through all of it. Car meets, mountain cruises, taking my friends to their first NASCAR race. Many, many road trips, and getting greeted with, "Hey officer," at work. Irreplaceable memories that make life a little bit better, and I don't think I'd have it any other way. There are moments when this car gives me hell that I think, maybe I'll just get a Camry or something normal and reliable, and not based on tech from the 1980s. But then that thought is quickly squashed by the fact that I couldn't think of life without a Crown Vic. Granted, I try to not let my car become my identity, but I feel so much less whole cruising in anything else. Honestly, for whatever I get next, it'll be really hard to top the Crown Vic, without spending a ton of money, of course. And that's why I still think if you want to get a car that's truly special, even the smallest of ways, Crown Vic is still the cheapest way to go, even if they're getting up there in price now, as it is. What I want next at the very moment is either a black 2010 Grand Marquis so I can have a mafia mobster car, and I could choose cops or robbers when I go for a drive, or a red Chevrolet pickup. I've always wanted a red Chevy just like my grandfather. Sounds dumb when I say it, but man, there's just something about a Chevy truck that I can't put into words. Maybe it's all capitalist propaganda, but man, do I want one. Even if I won't use it for truck stuff very often. And alright, so after all that leaves us with one final thing, the interior. So let's hop in. Still classic keyed entry. Not too many cars, even in 2009, were exclusively this way. Of course, Crown Vics are basically fleet cars. They're pretty much work trucks. So in here, everything is essentially the same, except the horn works, of course. I did do a sticker bomb. 2 years ago, it was just the K&N sticker, and now you can barely see it. I've acquired all these stickers, slowly building up over time from products. I've got them from people. I found them places. Sometimes I bought them on websites, or maybe I've been to events and got them. But yeah, it's built up over time. It's kind of fun just to look back and remember the memories with every single one of them. I still have the same little trees, though I've added the American flag one. Not literally the same ones from 2 years ago, but the same flavor. Or is it flavor? Smell? Aroma? I don't know. The Boss Audio aftermarket stereo system's still running strong there, and pretty much everything is the same inside. One thing I will state about these Boss Audio stereo systems, they have some problems. The Bluetooth disconnects ever so often, and it's not the phone, because I use independent Bluetooth speakers, and I've never had that problem. So this just sometimes just disconnects for no reason sometimes. So just know that you're gonna run into that with these Boss Audio stereo systems. I've got color matching interior pieces now. As you saw in the first video, they were the wrong color, but I have noticed one thing. This piece is wrong. I only noticed this for the first time like last month. So yeah, definitely need to get at that. I didn't notice this for basically the entire time I've owned this car. But now that I'm inside the car, let me clear up one misconception. I'm 100% sure you cannot actually add traction control, as it would be right here, just by adding the traction button that would be here. I have the plastic piece out of, I think, a town car, and I also have an 09 traction module that I was going to try and put in. But I'm not sure it'll work without actually coding things in. And I don't really feel like trying, because originally I did want to, just for poops and giggles, to see what would happen. But I don't think it's worth the hassle and potential damage to the car and the current module, because I've heard since then that Crown Vic traction control is weak and pretty much does nothing to help you. So it's really whatever at this point. Just wanted to clear that up. You'll have to do a lot more work on these things to get the TCS coded in. Mr. Random, debatably the biggest Crown Vic YouTuber, misled a lot of people in his video about that, and it shows he didn't even test it himself. So that's pretty much it for my Crown Victoria 2-year tour and the updates on the car. My opinion is that I love this car even more than I did 2 years ago, and I identify much more with it. But with that has come a love-hate relationship, because like I said before, it's a problem child. He doesn't like to stay not broken. Because of that, it feels like less my car. It feels less like home than my Taurus did. It feels like it's less there for me in some ways, even though it's kept running throughout all of colossal failures, except at the very beginning, But it isn't really as comforting knowing something new can just pop up at any time. While my Taurus had no issues whatsoever up until the day it died. So with that car, I could do the maintenance and add-ons that I wanted to do, not the maintenance and add-ons that I needed to do, which is how it is with the Crown Vic. There's very little I do with this car now that I want to do. They're reliable in a way. And if you're going to get a CVPI police car, you're in for many issues. But like I said, they are reliable in a way, and they will keep running. You just have to be ready to fork over cash to keep it that way. It's especially the case if you don't know what you're doing, like me. And even more so if you don't have a lot of heavy-duty tools, like me. Now, my metaphorical toolbox has expanded exponentially while maintaining this car, and I think it has taught me a lot that will serve me in future car ownership and in life in general. And I do want Panther cars in the future now. I still do, even though all that this car has put me through. But it's also given me lessons for life in general. But still, it'd be nice to go without those lessons from time to time. Unless you know what you're getting into, or you get a really good deal on a detective's car, one of those light-duty police cars, I'd say go for the civilian Vics or a Grand Marquis or something. Usually they're more expensive, but at the same mileage, 150,000 miles about, as my car, I bet you will have a fraction of the problems, if any. And it makes me really want to get a P73 or a MGM, because with the less problems and my expertise on dealing with Panther stuff, I could probably get really far with a civilian Vic. Maybe it just run on forever, honestly. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this Crown Vic update video, learned from my mistakes, and I do hope you learned a thing or two. Maybe I've convinced you to get one, or to not get one. Once again, thanks for watching, and I don't know what I'm really doing with this channel anymore, so this may be the last video for a while, or forever. And now I'll leave you with a few more pictures and videos from my experience owning the original Budget Cult Classic. Not today. Not today. Maybe if it was wet.
It's not really supposed to be. It's an outside.
Oh my gosh, it's so loud!
here. Some 350Z for their Nissan. Oh no, when I use these bodies, classic Fords over here. And then Beamers too. You know, you gotta show love to the German.